Extend the lead on your rivals by a factor of 10. These videos are designed to take my experience to have a positive impact on your race. We're going to be talking about pacing and doing pacing the right way to have a huge impact on your overall race result. The impact of race pacing on ultra endurance events are very underrated. It makes such a huge impact if you can get this right. Back in 2015, when I raced with Lizzie Broughton and we smashed the mixed K2 record, we got to the end of the first 25 kilometre section and I think we were in 4th or 5th place on relative times. By the end of the canal, halfway through, we had about an 8-minute lead. By the end of the race, we had an 80-minute lead overall for the competition. In 2023, we had closed the gap on our closest rivals at halfway, but by the end, we'd won by 85 minutes. To have a factor of 10 increase in the second half was all down to getting the pacing right from the start. In contrast to rushing little elements of the first half and shaving a few seconds has such a detrimental impact to your overall race result. You can lose huge chunks of time, either wasted or lost in the second half as a result of rushing that first bit too much. Think about your energy reserves as a bit like the fuel gauge, that range that you have on your car after you're filled up. Now, hopefully, when you're at Devizes, your range till finish, till empty, sits at least 125 miles. If you've got more, great. You can burn a little bit more fuel along the way. If your range is less than 125 miles, then you haven't done enough training, and let's hope the current is good or the tailwind pushes you along the course at some stage. But a friend of mine once explained when he lent his car to his mum and she passed it back and said, "Oh, by the way, I've got more fuel in the car for you. The range has gone up." And he was like, there's no more fuel in the car. You've been driving it. The range might have gone up, but it's the way you've been driving it. And that point is so important when you're thinking about pacing for this race. The way that he was driving compared to the way that his mum was driving meant that, yeah, he would have had a great first half of the race. He would have been tearing it up, but his range is dropping too fast. Taking that slow and steady pace pushes the range up and allows you to get to the second half of the race with a lot more energy. Think about that like when you're driving. All of those things, how hard you're accelerating. For me, that's a little bit like if you make a mistake on a portage, or if you rush a portage, or if you push to catch up with someone else. If you've got the opportunity to work with someone, then do that. Even if they're going maybe just a tiny bit slower than what you were doing, think about it as adding to your range. It's a bit like sitting behind a lorry for a while. Someone preserves their range as a result of it. They're not going as fast as they could go, but it means they can make it a lot further. And that way, in the second half of the race, they can push it a little bit more when they need to, or they don't have to go into emergency mode. A lot of people, their engines slip into limp mode by the end and they drag themselves to the finish just because they've run out of fuel. So these decisions that you make early on, you can top these up with your nutrition along the way, but more about that at another time. But think about that first 130 kilometers as just trying to extend the range that you've got as much as possible. When myself and Tom, we took on the record and we smashed it last year, we'd set specifically what pace we were going to do. We knew what pace we were going to hold from the start on the pound to the first lock, that first 24 kilometers or so. We then knew what average we were likely to hold from that lock through to Newbury. And then we knew how hard we were going to work that's going to take us to Reading, what we anticipated the Thames was going to pick us up by, and then we took a ballpark guess what we were going to be able to do on the tideway to the end. But we'd mapped all of that along the way, so we knew how hard we should be working. We didn't just go into that canal section blind and say, well, let's just work as hard as we can and let's try and put money in the bank. That wasn't ever going to help us. We knew what we were going to do, we planned what we were going to do, and we executed it exactly to plan, which meant when we got to the Thames, we felt great. We felt strong. The water got deeper and we could push on, and then we could start attacking that record. That's when we started taking huge chunks out of time out of our competitors, and that's why we managed to complete it in the time that we did, and that's why we won it by the margin that we did. Pay attention to what you're going to do, pay attention to where you're going to get your range from, enjoy that first half and race that second half. Best of luck.